I grew up in Detroit. When I was 14, we moved just a few miles away to a larger home in Redford. It was not a super old house. We immediately started hearing things. 90% of it was surrounding my infant sister. There was the time my mother heard her name over the baby monitor and went upstairs to find my sister's face wrapped in blankets, having a hard time breathing. Another time, she heard Mom being yelled behind her and saw my sister climbing a dresser as it was falling on top of her. As she grew older, she started sharing more of her own experiences. She had an imaginary friend named Timmy. She would creepily track his movements with her eyes as he sat down next to you. She told us he died in a fire. She was 3 at the time. She also started being very scared of the second floor that only housed my parents' room in the nursery. There was a man in a hood up there that had no feet and floated in front of my parents' closet. It got so bad that she would sit on the stairs and yell up to my mother as she was wrapping Christmas gifts to make sure she was alright. Not to mention the time my mom fell down the stairs pretty horrifically. Eventually, my parents decided to move and started to take on repairs that they thought would make the house more likely to sell. They tore out the kitchen windows to replace them. There was severe fire damage in the walls. There were vague rumours about the neighbourhood about a baby who had died in the house, but nothing substantial. My parents went on prepping the house for sale and things got louder. Babies crying, things moving, appliances wigging out in front of realtors, even tripping them after insulting the house. Dishwasher door hitting one in the shins, and screen door slamming back and knocking her off the porch. The last couple of days they lived there, we could hear the baby crying as we were sitting at the kitchen table, discussing the move. I did find a short time later that a young woman who was seeing a man at that address went missing decades ago, and when her body was finally found, she was pregnant. That was creepy with all the baby business. There were a lot of other small stories from that house that I didn't think relevant enough to add. It was just a weird house that made me question things, even though I lived more or less than 3 years of my life. After that, I moved into my great aunt's house and had a few more strange experiences. The event I'm describing happened to me about 30 minutes ago, and my heart is still racing. I was sitting in my car in front of my house. I had just finished a phone call and was just sitting in the car taking a breather before going into the house to get ready for bed. On the left side of my house is a large hedge that runs from the sidewalk along my house to the end of my backyard. Then there is my house, and directly on my right in the driveway. I look to my left and I see what looks like a person standing on the sidewalk behind the hedge. I instantly double take and it's dark, so it's just a black figure. I move my head around and still can't tell if it's a person. The hedge is just thick enough that I can't make it out. I convince myself it's nothing by a lamppost and branches in the hedge making it look like that. The shape never moved. I looked from many angles and it never moved. I let it go and went inside to go to bed. I'm in bed and I look up. There's a black figure in my room. Wow, writing that sentence felt like there was £10,000 being pushed on me. This has taken me nearly 25 minutes to write. My heart keeps racing and typing that sentence. My hands still feel kind of shaky. I don't understand why I feel this way. Someone please tell me what's going on. I put my cell phone light on the figure and there was nothing. I put my light down and it was there again. I immediately put the light on and it has stayed on since. There's nothing against that wall. There are no windows casting a shadow. It's an empty wall. I don't understand. It's not possible for there to be anything there, and it's so close it doesn't make sense. Someone please tell me what's happening to me. What should I do? I just moved in March. The first half of this happened right after or before I moved in. To give some background, I live with my best friend and her family. Me and my best friend's rooms are in the basement. Her family has been here a little over a year. The house is creepy, like it's beautiful but off. So it's on top of a hill with a long, steep driveway. When they bought the house, it had cameras only on the inside, in the hallways, basement living room, kitchen, and dining room. Also, my best friend's room has a padlock on the inside. The couple who sold it with everything in it and bought an RV and left. We all thought that seemed a little sketchy. So since night one of them being here, my best friend has heard things at night after 1 a.m. We could clearly hear walking. I would sleep over a lot before the move in the kitchen. Now you can hear every step a person takes. So if someone had gotten up and went in the kitchen, we'd hear them the whole way. But we'd only hear the walking in the kitchen itself. I was once on FaceTime with her, and the track lighting in her room started turning off one track, then the other, then the third on its own. When I moved in, we decided to try to contact the ghost. We tried to get a Ouija board but couldn't find one, so we decided on trying to use a pendulum to contact the spirit, and it worked. It answered our yes or no questions and told us that there was more than one ghost here. We were speaking to a female, and she doesn't make the noises and didn't die violently. After that, the activity has picked up. We hear more bangs and footsteps. My phone started playing music from an app that wasn't open. I heard a deep breath in my face as I walked into the dark living room. Finally, last night, I heard someone walk from the kitchen where the back door is, through the dining room, then through the living room to the top of the basement stairs, aka the quieter way to take when coming home late. I assumed it was my best friend who was out, but the walking stopped, and she came home this morning. If it was someone in the house, I would have heard them walk both to the kitchen and back, not just back. We think something happened in this house. So a week or so after all this, my best friend was trying to fall asleep, and she heard the distinct sound of her door opening 3 times, and next to her bed, which couldn't make sense. She got up, checked, and laid back down, and then she felt what she describes as one of our cats jumping on her bed, and the pressure of the cat walking around. This is very normal for our cats. Then she started to feel her blanket being pulled off of her and sat up quickly and shined the light on her phone. There was nothing there, not even a cat. Before this, I found a ring on my floor. It's not mine or any of the other females in my house. It literally appeared on my floor when I went to get water. I have no idea where it came from. But I thanked whoever left it for me. I'm thinking possibly the female ghost who actually might be my mother who passed, since she told us she didn't die here or violently. I'm 20 years old now, and I've seen ghosts since I was a kid. The first time that I can remember, I was still in elementary school. At the time, my family lived in a trailer on the outskirts of town. I couldn't have been older than 5th grade, so about 11 years old at the time. My father left me and my one sister home alone that night, while he took my oldest sister to pick up a friend in Ohio. I live in Pennsylvania. Well, the sister that I was home with was asleep in our room, and I was on the couch. I hated sleeping in my bedroom for some reason. How my trailer was set up was you walk into the front door and you're in the kitchen and dining area. Then you step up 2 steps and you're in the living room. Then from the living room, there was just a long hallway that had the bedrooms, the bathroom, and the washer and dryer. Sitting on the couch, you could see all the way down to my dad's room. I looked over from the TV and I saw what appeared to be a leg moving behind one of the hampers, as if it was someone on their back using their legs to help them quickly get up. The rest of the night I was crying because I was so scared. The second time I saw a ghost, I was in 7th grade, about 13 at this point. I was a library aide at my school, which meant that I would run passes, put books away, and make sure that everything was generally straightened up. Well, one day that I was at the library, I was sitting down back in the bookcases to straighten up the bottom shelf. The librarian was on the other side of the room teaching a class. so there's nobody back there with me. I saw someone walk down the aisle next to me, and when I looked, no one was there. That was exciting, but that's that. Now let's come to the present day. I'm a practicing witch at age 20, and I see ghosts constantly. I can even hear them sometimes. Specifically, the ghost of my dead uncle comes to see me a lot. He's a cool dude, to be honest, but the rest of the spirits in my house aren't so cool. The farther down you go in my house, the worse the energy gets. The basement is the worst. My room isn't full of negative energy, thankfully. I live in the attic. My paranormal experience started when I was young. We moved into our current house when I was about 7. I remember being excited to move, and when we pulled up, my excitement changed. Putting on a good face though, I ran in trying to find a room, which was in the basement, which was dark. The whole house was, and still is, dark. My first experience was almost instantly. The first few nights I slept on the sofa in the main room. I always faced the back of the sofa because I remember seeing a little girl peeking out at me from around boxes. She wasn't scary looking, it was just strange. At the time, I didn't understand the paranormal. It wasn't brought up, and we didn't watch any paranormal type shows. So when I saw this girl, I didn't understand what I was seeing. My brother was 1 at the time, and my parents decided that I should sleep in his room, upstairs until they fix up my room in the deep dark basement. At night, you could hear someone walking around the front room, kitchen and hallways. I also remember my brother's baby toys would turn on. My mom would always chop it up to bring the battery almost dying, or a short on it. These things would happen all the time. As I grew older, the activity changed. Both my mum and I got into the paranormal and began sharing some of our experiences. Hearing things, seeing things out the corner of our eyes. We started watching different shows and tried to learn more. When I was about 12, things got a bit intense. One time I was home alone and I could hear a full-on conversation coming from the basement, which I had finally moved down to. I had this MP3 player that could record. I decided to grab it and put it down there. I put the recorder down and walked back upstairs and sat in the kitchen. I could still hear the conversation. I eventually went outside to see if it was a neighbour. Nothing. I even checked all the TVs around the house and they were all off. At some point, I finally went downstairs and grabbed the MP3 player. When I hit the last step and rounded the corner, the voices stopped. I listened back to the recording and there were voices. I went to show my parents the voices when they'd come back home, and the recording was gone. It took multiple steps to delete recordings. One night, my mum and I were watching TV, and in between us, we heard someone say, "Hello?" in a little girl's voice. We immediately jumped up and looked at each other. We went around looking to see if someone was in the house or outside. Nothing. We found nothing. I was playing a video game with a past friend, and I thought my mom entered the room. I looked over thinking I was about to see my mom, but it was a young girl about my age. She had long brown hair and a light blue dress on. I couldn't make out facial features. She turned and ran down the hall towards the stairs. My friend and I went to follow. She wasn't upstairs. I asked my mum if she had just seen this girl, and she looked confused. She hadn't seen anyone. Now, for the biggest event, the one that still causes me anxiety. I was doing an activity in my room, and my stereo turned up. Same MP3 player familiar. Thing had a physical dial that had to be turned. I went up and told my mom. She decided to yell down the stairs into the basement, "If you're down there, turn the radio up." And it went to full blast, MP3 and radio. That night, I was listening to music again and jokingly asked the spirit to turn down the radio. It happened, right in front of my eyes. I decided to read a little before bed. I turned the radio off and was reading in silence. Out of nowhere, I heard this growling, laughing sound coming from the corner of my room. No pets were in my room, just me. I slept in my parents' room for maybe a week. I finally decided I needed to reclaim my room. I brought our family dog in with me. Again, I was reading. I noticed out of the corner of my eye that my dog was tracking something. His body was tense. I looked up and see what he's staring at. In front of us was this black orb. I knew I wasn't crazy because the dog was watching it. It was moving back and forth. Easy to say, I didn't sleep in my room for another week. The activity comes and goes at this point, and is mostly limited to noises and bumps in the night. Why did I have so much activity at a young age? I've loved the paranormal ever since 4th grade, and I read Ghosts I Have Been by Richard Peck. I would joke to my now ex-husband that I love ghosts, but I've never seen one. My sister lives in a haunted house, but I had never experienced one. My son is now into the paranormal, and we have lots of plans to visit haunted hotels together next summer, dragging my daughter along, much against her will. I think, though, we may not have to look much farther than our own house now. I bought this house brand new 2 years ago, this October. We've never had anything crazy going up to the last month. We used to joke that a ghost stole the remote all the time, mainly because it's small and falls into cracks in the sofa all the time. Recently, though, things have gone really strange. I'll start with several months ago. I started seeing what looked like a black cat in my peripheral vision. I saw it on the counter, jump from a shelf in my room and out by my car. I figured it was my imagination. I lost a black cat about 12 years ago. I loved her like a child. I bottle fed her from the moment she was born, and she was the first pet I had as an adult. When she died at age 12 of cancer, I was devastated. Last month, I walked downstairs to grab something from the kitchen, while my kids were upstairs in my room watching a movie. As I entered the dark kitchen, there was a bright light shining on the end of my cabinets. There were no lights in my kitchen that shine in that area, and it was so concentrated in one area, it was more like a flashlight. As I entered the kitchen, it blinked out. I was so confused. Here's a list of what has happened since. I was in my laundry room upstairs, and it sounded like someone ran up the stairs, but no one was there. My dog even turned around and stared at the stairs, waiting for someone to show up. Things disappearing and then reappearing a few days later. Right now, it has an affinity to my slippers. Every time I have both slippers together, one of them will disappear again. I was downstairs napping on the couch when I heard my daughter call me Mama. She likes to call me that instead of Mum, and she was out with her father that day. 2 days ago, I walked into the kitchen at night again, and all the lights were off. There was a light glow above my ceiling fan, as if a small flashlight was sitting on the fan. My backyard faces a large open field where a new housing development will be going in, so it's darker than dark when the lights are off, but I could see my fan perfectly. As I entered the room, it blinked out. Finally, as I was in bed trying to sleep last night, I heard heavy footsteps walking down my hallway. I do have several cats, but they couldn't have made that noise. I'm worried that all my wishing for a haunting has brought it here. Or maybe it's the construction on the land and it's been drawn to my house. Either way, it seems like it's shy and not particularly interested in being seen. I've kept this all away from my kids and they haven't said anything about anything happening to them. My ex and I have started calling it Lumiere. I've known my buddy Ruben for about 15 years. His family owns an automotive shop at the end of my dad's street, and they live a few blocks away. They have a main house and a small 3-room guest house in the back, where my friend stays. The first strange experience happened one day while we were hanging out watching a Spurs game. In the guest house, there's the main room, which is a kitchen and living area. A small bedroom to the left, which for some reason has a window in the living area. And straight ahead is a small bath and another bedroom. The back bedroom is just used for storage, and I had never been in there. As we sat watching the game, I distinctly heard someone coughing and then muttering something indistinguishable. I turned to Ruben and said, "Was someone just coughing back there?" He said, "Yep." "Who's back there?" I asked. "Nobody." "What the fuck?" So I went back to the room and sure enough, no one was there. There's no other way in or out of the room and it kind of freaked me out. We heard the coughing, voices, and what sounded like someone moving around back there often. He explained to me the house is haunted. They see and hear things regularly. They had a crew of workers doing some remodeling on the front house, and they all walked off the job after seeing something that scared them. Since then, we've witnessed tons of strange goings on. Many times in the back house, we would see a face peeking out from the interior window that looks into the living area from the bedroom. As soon as you'd acknowledge it, it would duck back. It happened often enough that we would just ignore it. The first time my wife saw it, she jumped and said, "Someone was just looking through the window. Who's back there?" "Nobody." I told her the house was haunted, but I guess she thought I was bullshitting her. Several times she had something pull her hair, or would feel something sit down next to her on the couch. For a time, I took up some of the remodeling work of the home as they couldn't find anyone else. I guess the word had gotten out from the previous workers' experiences. I'd work in the day while no one was home, and I'd always feel like there was someone else watching me or standing behind me when no one was there. I'd also witness shadowy figures walk past the doorway quite regularly, and would often see someone standing there in my peripheral vision. And when I'd turn, no one would be there. One day, I was working in the guest house installing a new toilet. The bathroom door swings outward and isn't level, so if the door isn't shut all the way, it'll swing open. I was on my knees installing the water line when the door slammed shut violently with a bang. I leaped up, hit my head on the sink and threw open the door. "Ruben, you bastard," I began, thinking my friend had come home and was trying to scare me. There was no one there. The front door was closed and there was no draft. I called my friend and he was at work, nowhere near the house. Needless to say, I called it a day and went home. We've experienced much more weirdness as well. His brother Joseph took a selfie once to put on a dating website and captured the scariest photo I've ever seen. There's a skeletal creature, very grim reaper, standing over his left shoulder, with its hand on his shoulder. You could see it clear as day, including each of its skeletal fingers on his shoulder. No, I do not have a copy of this pic. The family is devout Catholic, and it shook Joseph up so badly, he ended up deleting the photo and refuses to talk about it. We've since moved, and I haven't been to the house in the last couple of years, but I have no doubt the activity continues to this day. I have no evidence for this, just my own eyesight and the words from others. My childhood home was a townhouse, 4 houses linked together in a row, and mine was the last house, Unit D. The story was that the family before us had a father that was violent drunk, and he threw his child against the metal floor door. The door was so badly dented that they had to replace the door. My parents physically saw this door before they replaced it, and they say the dent was horrifying. It was clear to them how much force his father used to throw his child. All we know about the boy was that he landed in the hospital, and the family was evicted. We moved in 2 months after the family was evicted. Fast forward a few months, and everything was fine. No activity whatsoever. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-story townhouse. I had my own bedroom, my parents had their bedroom, and my 2 older brothers shared a bedroom. I was 4, my brother was 6, and my eldest brother was 11. It was very messy, and my parents didn't really discipline us. So when my room became so messy that I couldn't sleep in it, I took the top bunk bed of my brother's room, and they shared the bottom bunk bed. I woke up in the middle of the night once, which wasn't uncommon for me. I sat up and looked over to the door that was usually closed, and saw a little blonde boy with a striped shirt and blue shorts walk in. He asked me if I wanted to play. I thought to myself, maybe I'm dreaming. I'll go back to sleep, and laid back down. I told no one. My brother, 6, usually played hockey in the garage by himself, with the garage door closed when it was dark out. Me and my mum were in the living room, and my eldest brother was at his friend's house. My brother comes trotting in from the garage and asks our mum if he can play hockey with the little boy. My mum looked at him very confused because she knew the garage was closed. She stands up and heads to the garage. What little boy? My brother tells us there's a boy in the garage asking him to play. Our mom opens the door to the garage and there's no boy. She tells him to come back inside and play in the living room. Us being kids, we didn't understand that our mom was becoming worried, and we went back to playing. Fast forward again to about a year into living in the house. Me and my brother would catch glimpses of this boy every now and then, but he had stopped asking us to play. He would just stand in the upstairs hallway or doorways and walk away. Sometimes we'd try to find him, other times we'd go back to what we were doing. We never felt fear, we always felt calm when we saw the boy. My eldest brother and our father, both of whom were always outside the house, never saw anything. Around this time, our mom started fainting a lot. She became very pale and weak. One day, she asked us if we would sit in the bed with her. She told us she had to go into surgery because she was bleeding. She had something wrong with her uterus that made her bleed continuously for 3 months. She lost a lot of blood and it would kill her if she didn't get the surgery. After a few days, my mom went into surgery and a family friend took us 3 into their home for about 2 weeks. During this time, my dad stayed at our home. He worked nights and slept during the day. One afternoon, when my dad started to wake, the neighbour in the A unit was speaking loudly in the hallways. My dad's window was open. He overheard the couple trying to find a solution to the little boy they've been seeing walking their upstairs hallway, wearing a striped shirt and blue shorts. My dad, remembering the conversation he had with my mom about the boy, ran downstairs, through the garage to the alleyway, and asked my neighbours if they'd seen the boy. They confirmed that they not only saw the boy, but that he had been asking their son to play. They moved in after we did, so they were not able to confirm or deny if it was the boy that was thrown against the door in our unit. It felt great to know we weren't going crazy, and someone else saw the exact same thing. Just about 2 weeks later, my mom comes home and us children come back too. My neighbour in the C unit greeted us with a special fruit punch she made from scratch. She asked my dad if she could talk to him when my mom was resting. Once my dad came back outside to speak to her, she told him she was sick with terminal cancer and to please check up on her every few days. I'm not entirely sure how the conversation went, but she told my dad she had been seeing strange things in her home. She wouldn't go into details though, according to my dad. She passed away a few months later. About 2 years after my mom's surgery, and nothing significant other than occasionally seeing the boy and making peace with his presence, my mom was healthy enough to get a job as a manager at one of the new townhome properties that was owned by the same company as the one we were living at. My mom says right before we moved, she was in the bathroom and heard a loud growl. She tried to move us out as fast as we could after that. Fast forward to a few years after the move, my mom, now a manager of the sister townhomes, was talking to the manager of the townhomes we used to live in. The manager, we'll call her Tammy, said, "Oh boy, here comes the crazy tenants." My mum asks, "What makes them crazy?" Tammy tells her that they want out of their lease because they think their unit is haunted. My mum's breath was taken away. Let me guess, they live in Unit D. Tammy laughed. "Oh my God, yes. How did you know?" My mum told her that was our unit, and it was definitely haunted. It was the last confirmation we needed to know for sure that it was haunted. It wasn't just us to experience the boy. I've always wanted to go back and do an investigation, but I have to wait until it's vacant. I believe there had to have been a demon invited to the unit, which led to the boy's father being violent, my mum's health decline, the growl before we left, and our neighbour's death from cancer. It's also possible that the boy was a demon in disguise. So about 3 or 4 years ago, I was sitting in my room playing some Minecraft and having a good time. But then I heard three solid knocks on the top of my window. It's important to note that it was the top of the window, because the bottom has screening on it, eliminating any kids from doing this. So I hear three knocks like someone was knocking on my door, and I immediately figure it was my brother pranking me. But then, not even a few seconds later, my brother kicks open my door and says, "Stop knocking on his window." Meaning both of our windows were knocked on at relatively the same time. So I asked my dad to show us the security footage of the side of our house where my window was located. So we're watching the video, and absolutely nothing happens. No movement, shapes, nothing. So of course I get freaked out, and my dad told me it was the wind or a shovel. Like that made any sense. So I lost a little sleep that night, but pretty soon my brain went past it, and I forgot all about it. Until today. Because today, about 10 minutes ago, I was playing some Fallout in my room when I heard three knocks on my door. So I say, "Come in," but nothing happens. So I assume it was the bathroom door. My room is right next to it, and that somebody was taking too long in the shower or whatever. But then 3 or 4 knocks on my door. Not little taps or anything, I'm talking solid knocks as if someone wanted into my room. So again I say, "Come in," but still nothing. So I get up and go to the door, and I hear another 3 knocks. And I throw open the door, and nothing. Nobody's there. The bathroom door is wide open with the lights off. Nobody in the kitchen, hallway, anything. So I go over and ask my dad in the living room if anybody had been knocking on my door, and he said no. He was in there, my stepmom and sister were outside, and my brother was at his friend's house. So what the hell's knocking on my door? I don't know if I really think it was a ghost, but it certainly was something knocking on my door, and my window. Now, I've had other occurrences like knocks or tapping, but it's all been like house settling or bugs on the window. But these two I can't explain. Do you think it's a ghost? Or am I going a little crazy? My father grew up in a rural town somewhere in Southeast Asia, where houses or huts are usually far away from each other and trees and bushes are abundant. Television and electronic toys were not yet well known in his province at that time, so he and his cousins usually just goof around to pass the time. One of the favourite places they like to frequent is a certain humongous mango tree that resides just roughly 2 or 3 kilometres away from my father's house. The mango tree is as tall as a 5-story building, has a big hollowed trunk, and has leaves that are so thick, sun rays rarely reach the soil it grows from. Beside the tree is a small bamboo hut. This hut is usually being used by farmers that want to cool down after a long day in the field. Surrounding the said tree are tall stalks of sugarcane, making the spot where the mango tree looks like a lone island, a little patch of earth in a vast green plantation. My father, his sister Anna, and cousins Timothy, Hank, and Patricia came to this mango tree one particular day. They want to play hide and seek, and the place provides some good hiding spots in such a small place, so they decided to play there before dawn. They started their game as soon as they arrived at the place. It's after lunch, so the sun is beaming hot, and it's a good time for some hide and seek game. Laughter and shouts filled the air, and they lost track of time. My father's sister, Anna, asks for time out to catch her breath after chasing one of their cousins. All 5 of them decided to take a break and take a rest inside the small bamboo hut. My father remembers that the sun is almost setting at this point. While Hank is taunting Anna for being slow, Timothy suddenly hushes them and tells them to stop talking. My father asked him why, puzzled and curious on how his cousin acted. Timothy just put his index finger on his lips, signaling my father to keep quiet, and then Patricia complained of a foul smell. They can't tell where the smell came from, but it reeks the whole place in an instant, and that's where they heard a sound that my father can only describe as a loud gong. All of them silently crouch in one corner of the hut. They're enveloped in fear they can't identify. Then another bang of a gong, and another, and then another, until it became too loud that they had to cover their ears.
Hank peeks through a small slit and quickly covers his mouth to stop himself from screaming. The remaining kids, ever so curious, scramble to see what made Hank react that way. This is how my father described what they saw that afternoon. It was like a parade of demons, he said, and it came out from the large hole of the mango tree beside the hut and went through the tall sugar canes. The parade consists of red carabaos in front, hauling what looks like carriages with big cauldrons. The carabaos have fiery eyes and a nose, bellowing loudly while a tall, red and gaunt-like creature whips its back. The said creature has long horns, almost covering both of its ears. It has an abnormally long torso, bald head and skinny arms. They can't fully see its face as it walks past the hut. Following the cauldron carriages are small red people. They don't look like midgets or dwarves, he said. They all look normal, except they're tall as 3 feet. Their skin is red, and they have glowing eyes. And all of them are wailing non-stop, louder and louder each time the gong resounds. It's like if the wailing slowly subsides, the gong will be heard and automatically they'll all scream in unison. Just beside the small people are big red dogs that don't have any fur. They're bigger in size compared to the small red people, in which they're sometimes attacking or barking at. Suddenly, one of the said red dogs ate a small red person. They all saw how it struggled to get out of its fangs, but the dog just shook it violently like a toy. Imagine how dogs play with their toy. This made Patricia cry. Timothy quickly covers her eyes and hugs her tight. After the long line of small red people passed, which my father thought would never end, 4 tall creatures followed, the same as the one with the whip in front. But one of these creatures is not red, but white, and its face doesn't look like the other creatures. This white creature is the one who's holding the gong and hitting it. The other red creatures are holding some kind of pole with a flag on it. I've asked my father what kind of flag. He can't remember it anymore. The parade passed the hut and gradually vanished. The sound of the gong, the smell, and the wailing, until they can't see or hear it anymore, only darkness and cicadas. All returned to normal, but the group is still afraid to go out and return home. While Timothy and Hank are calming the girls because they're both crying now, my father heard his father calling them from outside. The sound of worry and anger can be heard from his voice. He scolds the kids for staying too late, for it's past 11 p.m. and they haven't returned home. The group told my grandfather what they had witnessed. My grandfather quickly gathered the kids and hurried home. They all washed the kids before letting them inside the house, burned their clothes, and all of my relatives prayed until the morning. They're never allowed to play on the big mango tree again. What really bothers my father to this day is how familiar the white figure looks. It has a long hair and a beard, similar to how we picture the Almighty One. I grew up just a few minutes away from the old myrtles plantation. When I was a teenager, we'd sneak out onto the property and drink beer, hiding away from staff and people staying over at the bed and breakfast. The whole area I grew up in, East and West Feliciana parishes in Louisiana, is full of old spots that I've searched and explored way outside of tourist hours. At night, usually while drinking or talking, but in my defense we never hurt anything, we were trying to spook ourselves. Anyway, years and years later, I still live in Louisiana, and now live with my wife and cats in a big old house that dates back to the Civil War. My particular place is known as the most haunted house in my neighborhood. So much so, one of my next door neighbor kids did a paper on my place. She did an incredible amount of research, and it turns out that my house served as a medical facility during the Civil War itself. Aside from general haunted stories that she relayed to me from herself, siblings and neighbors that predated me buying the property a month before Katrina, I had also talked to one previous owner, as well as a guy my age that grew up as a kid here. The previous owner lived here with 2 daughters. He alleges his kids, would see glimpses of things and hear bumps, walking, and what I guess sounds like a typical spooky place. That guy that grew up here I met on an off chance. I was mowing the front yard and he pulled up with his wife to see the house he grew up in. Super nice guy and gal, same industry as me. All three of us worked in web dev, and apparently completely sane. Anyway, he asked me if I'd met his aunt, very matter-of-factly. I told him that I bought the house from a guy that bought it after he lived here, assuming his aunt was the owner when he lived here. He quickly told me that no. He was indeed talking about a ghost that used to talk with him and be very visible to him. She passed away here. I'm a skeptic, but I'm addicted to ghost videos and stories. So I live in a place that's allegedly haunted, and since 2005 I've never seen or heard anything I couldn't explain or repeat with very natural and normal causes. From some pipes in this place just being old as sin, to having raccoons invade our attic one winter. From what I can gather, if a place can be haunted, then mine should probably be pretty ripe for the pickings. Is the general consensus no activity equates to no ghosts? Or can I rile them up? My family and I lived in Fort Leavenworth for almost a year, around 2015. When we first moved in around July, nothing felt particularly off, at least to me. Beginning around October one night, my sister woke up screaming bloody murder that somebody yanked her hair from behind her bed. Her headboard has metal bars, so it seems plausible. Except that her headboard was pushed tightly against the wall, so nobody could stand behind her to pull her hair. I thought nothing of it. Another morning, I woke up to her crying that there were 1,000,000 dead spiders in our bathtub. I ran into the bathroom with her, and we both saw nothing. They had gone faster than they appeared, so I still thought nothing of it. Another night, she was hanging out in another bedroom that was upstairs. Upstairs was all kids' bedrooms. The first floor had all been torn out and then redone, and had a master bed and bath added there. And the door started shaking in its place like the wind was pulling it, but the window was shut. She insisted that something or someone was doing it and couldn't get out of the room. Once again, I brushed the experience off. The next night, as I was turning off my bedside lamp getting ready for bed, I saw the silhouette of what appeared to be a man in a Civil War uniform. I never saw any colour, it was all black. I could never see his face either. But every night, he would stand at the foot of my bed and watch me sleep. Sometimes I'd wake up and feel his presence by my bedside table, closer to my face. Other nights, I'd experienced sleep paralysis and was tormented by images of him. I never felt like I was meant to be afraid of this man, except during sleep paralysis. Sometimes I wonder if it was the same entity tormenting my sister. And why was she the one to get tormented? If anything, I was the one always talking shit about it around the house before I started seeing him. Then again, maybe it was just to remind me that he's always watching. Once upon a time, I came home from work to an empty house. Empty, except for my 3 dogs who were very excited to see me, and I them. We played fetch, screamed and barked as loud as we wanted. I then let them out to do their business, and to treat them with some pepperonis on their return. We lived in a small house that dated back to the 1950s. This house is shared with my wife, who was at work. The house has a couple rooms and 2 bathrooms. To get to our room, you needed to walk through the bathroom, which would have 2 doors. One to close off the living room, and the other to close off our room. So it was finally time to settle down. 2 of the other dogs found a comfy spot on the couch. The other one chose to follow me. She's a small one, black coat and about 15 pounds. I walked into the bathroom, but she wouldn't follow. She instead laid on the floor and pointed her body toward the living room. Strange, I thought. You want to stay here? That's okay, I said to her as I closed the bathroom door and walked into my room. I got undressed and into some loose gym clothes. I checked my phone that I neglected all day, and when I walked back into the bathroom, and surprisingly, my dog was in there staring at the wall, shivering. She was absolutely terrified. I looked at the door. It was closed shut. How did you get in here? I exclaimed. The only obvious explanation at that time was that she teleported and was terrified of her newfound powers. I was so excited, I picked her up and praised her. Wow, are you my teleporting puppy? That's amazing. This went on for a couple minutes, so I'll spare you those details. I walked back out to the living room to check if my wife was home. Still empty. I snuck out an extra pepperoni for our teleporting pup. She's a special girl. This never happened again. We have had some weird experiences. Bright white figures passing through, objects falling over, doors opening. Nothing we really felt threatened by. Every now and then, I think back and wonder how or what happened that day. What did she experience that shook her? How did she get through the door? I'll never know. And we moved out happily ever after due to a new job, far, far away. Her phone number was put on Angie's list for yard landscaping and yard work. She does signs for people's birthdays. She called them and they went through the mishap and removed her from Angie's list. The reason the transcript read dead is because there was dead air or dead silence. Not sure where the off Thursday part happened, but it's whatever. The voicemail played music too, and it was the Angie's List hold music. The way that their voicemail is set up plays the music like that, which is weird. Apparently, people use Angie's List a lot for prank calls, or someone prank called her too, and it was confusing. But I'm incredibly glad that we aren't dying. However, I do want to thank everybody for the advice with the dowsing rods, and what to do and what not to do when handling ghost communication equipment. I should be more careful with that weird voicemails or not. This has been crazy, you guys. Glad you're on the journey with me. So on Sunday, I received some dowsing rods, an EMF reader, and a spirit box from my mom. I never really tried to communicate with ghosts until last night, and I only used the dowsing rods and the EMF reader. At one point, once I calibrated the rods to yes and no, I asked if the spirit I was talking to was my dead grandfather, who died last year. The yes rod turned. I'm sure that the way my hands were shaking could have affected the turning of the rods, but as soon as that yes rod turned, my EMF reader went off. I got terrified and put everything down and sat frozen on my bed. The reader went off again, and I hurriedly turned it off and called my sister in to help me. I kept the EMF reader off and continued using the dowsing rods, but got near to no communication with anything. The rod turned once, and only just a little bit. I tried to tell a good welcome that he wished to speak to someone nice, and that we meant no harm and just wanted to communicate. After no response, I finally said goodbye, and that we could try another day, and hopefully they were doing okay. And then I put everything away under my bed. The next day, today, my dad's girlfriend pulled me over and showed me her phone. She gets transcriptions of the voicemails she gets in her email. So she showed me the description and it says, dead, 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 dead. Thursday, off, off. Thursday, dead, dead. Or something like that. But when she played the voicemail that matched it, it sounded nothing like that. She runs a sign business that puts signs up for people's birthdays and other celebrations. So she gets voicemails all the time about her business and people asking if they can get signs for parties. And that's what this voicemail sounded like. But the transcription is what caught all of us off. And scariest of all, tomorrow is Thursday. She planned to work from home just in case, but she has a chiropractor appointment tomorrow, and I'm afraid something might happen on the way there, or on the way back. Are there any reasonable explanations to this, or did I anger something bad? When I was younger, around 6, I got this basic wood dollhouse. It was just a pale brown colour and I loved it. Before getting this dollhouse, I don't remember any paranormal things happening, and if they did, I was too young to realise. After having this dollhouse for around a week or so, stuff started to happen. I would hear this soaring noise outside my window when no one was there. I would hear scratching outside it too. I was terrified of being in my room. One night, I had a strange dream and it involved the dollhouse. Please remember I was still a child. In my dream, I was playing with my dollhouse and my little pony toy. I remember hearing something here in my window, so I glanced over and then went back to my dollhouse. And there was a soaring noise, and my toy was soaring through my dollhouse. And for some reason, I went back to my window and looked out behind my curtain, and I saw him. His eyes were sewn shut. He looked like he was in a hospital robe, and then he smiled. I was so scared, and just writing this, my heart was pounding. It wasn't a friendly smile, it was a dark, twisted smile. He looked dangerous. I often describe him now looking like a patient from an asylum. After that dream, things started getting worse. The soaring noise was happening every day. I didn't want to be in my room at all. I never felt alone. I put my dollhouse in my wardrobe and refused to touch it. I think it only made things worse. He always seemed to be outside my window, but after putting it away, it seemed like he was in the house. I started hearing footsteps outside my bedroom door when everyone was asleep, and someone would always call my name in the middle of the night from the kitchen. Then something was in my room. I would hear breathing, and my room was always cold. When I was 11, something happened that I didn't know could. I was awake around 2 or 3 a.m. reading when I felt like something punched me in the face. I got a bloody nose and woke up my mum, only for her to tell me that something fell on me and I was more than likely asleep having a dream when it happened. I didn't believe it. Something was causing me physical harm and it was in my room. My cats would freak out in the middle of the night and leave my room. My corner unit in my room thuds and creaks at night, but never during the day. This has been happening for years, and recently I've been punched by something again. It seems more aggressive since I threw out my dollhouse, as I thought it would leave me alone. The last few nights, I hear something step on the creaky floorboard outside of my room, but a reflection on my desktop shows nothing. I'm seriously scared that I'm being haunted by that man in my dream 12 years ago, but maybe I'm just overreacting, and it's my imagination. I need help. Do you think I'm being haunted? If so, what could it be? Is there anything I can do? It doesn't seem to happen to anyone else in my family. Only me. Everything I'm going to tell is true. For a bit of backstory, I was born in the late 90s in Tahiti, French Polynesia. My parents moved there before I was born. This story is about my mom, who had bipolar disorder. This is a state I'd always known my mom, taking medicine and being hospitalized. I've only learned the reasons behind her hospitalizations after she passed away. She was very depressed, had a traumatic life as a child and teen. Everything to make you ill. My mom took her life when I was 13. We weren't in the same country. I was still in Tahiti with my dad, and she was in France to seek better treatments. Obviously, it wasn't expected, at least not to me, not being aware that her illness put thoughts in her mind. I don't recall everything like clear water, I believe because it's seen as a trauma by my brain, so all the time around that event is blurry. But this is carved into my bones. I believe it happened a few weeks after my mom passed away. You need to know that I hadn't seen her for 4 months when she passed. We would see each other once a year in the summer. Anyway, that day my dad asked me to go buy some groceries. The grocery store was only 10 minutes by foot, so it wasn't dangerous for a 13-year-old to go by themselves. It was the middle of the day, lots of cars on the road, nothing out of the ordinary. I was walking on the sidewalk minding my business. I looked up, and there she was. My mom passed away weeks ago. I felt terrified, like I could remember chills all over my body. I was petrified. To this day, I can't understand how I could have been afraid, because I believe seeing someone you love should make you excited. But it wasn't my mom from months before, ill and sick. She was young, energetic, a 20-something-year-old. I think she was 100 or 200 meters ahead of me, and she was walking towards me. I remember feeling afraid that she would talk to me and tell me she was back and other things. Now, I think I was afraid because, even though I didn't know that yet, because children don't think about that, I knew that wherever she was so much better than before, and this was the only way for her to stop hurting. Yet I was so afraid, we crossed on the sidewalk. She didn't stop. I didn't stop. I started running to the grocery store. I don't think I'd told my dad about it for years. December of this year will mark 10 years without her. I've never seen her again, nor dreamt about her since her death. 6 years ago, I spoke to a medium who told me she was so much better and that she had the appearance of a young and bright woman in her early 20s. When I was very young, I used to visit my aunt and uncle who had this big holiday house by a lake in a forest. In the story, I was around 10 years old. The day before it happened, I was very active, running and swimming, etc. Because of that, I went to bed very early and woke up the next day around 4 or 5 a.m. I remember being very thirsty, so I was looking for something to drink in my room, but I couldn't find anything, so I decided to go downstairs to the kitchen. When I left the room, my aunt's dog came to me, and I played with it for a minute or two before going downstairs. As I was going down the stairs, I could see that it was still pretty dark, but you could already see small traces of light, so it was possible to see without any lights being on. The dog was walking with me on my left. In front of me and to my left, there was a large living room. On the right side of the wall, to my left across the living room, there was a kitchen, and on the left side of that wall, there was a corridor with the main door at the end of it, a storage room on the left, and a bathroom on the right. As I was in the middle of the stairs, the dog started growling towards the corridor to my left, which was across the living room. I turned my head as well and saw a pitch black humanoid shape. There was no face or any details like skin or clothing. It was a pitch black shape of a human facing me. It looked masculine. The dog was growling and slightly barking at it. I was shocked, so I just stared at it without moving. After a moment, the shape turned to its right and walked into the storage room. I didn't know what to do, so at first, I ran upstairs and wanted to start waking everyone up. But for whatever reason, I didn't do that, and instead, I decided to turn every single light on in the whole house, starting from the staircase light. At that age, I believed that the lights would somehow protect me. I kept turning every light on as I was approaching the storage room, and of course, I had the dog with me too. Upon finally reaching the storage room, I looked inside, but there was nobody inside. Naturally, I ran upstairs and woke my mom and my aunt and told them everything. Of course, I was told that it was nothing but a dream or hallucination. I probably would have believed that if it wasn't for the dog which was growling and barking at it. The next part is something that my brother told me about 15 years later, after I told him about the shadow person story. My brother, who was much older than me, was also there that summer, but he was sleeping in a guest house. Later, during that morning around 8, when everybody was already outside, he was eating breakfast in the kitchen of the main house. He told me that when he was there alone, he felt that he was only able to describe as something bad or evil, and his vision had disappeared for about 5 seconds. He was only able to see black. When he regained his vision, the bad feeling disappeared. He apparently even went to a doctor, but there was absolutely nothing wrong with his eyes. This was my only paranormal experience, and if it wasn't for the dog and my brother, I probably would have believed that it was nothing more than my imagination. This started when I was making cereal at 20 past 10, about 7 years ago. I was watching YouTube as usual and was ready to settle down for the night. Just as I finished making my cereal, I grabbed the bowl and turned around towards my living room. Then for a literal half second, there was a girl all black and white, standing around 2 feet away from me, looking at me and laughing. She disappeared after a split second, but her laugh echoed in my head. I was shocked, but I just stood there smiling like an idiot. After about half a minute, I went to get my cereal and continued watching YouTube. I never was truly scared of things like this, and she didn't give me a malevolent vibe. Cut to 2 weeks later, where again, it's 20 past 10. I'm watching YouTube and want to make some cereal. Yes, I love cereal. I put the spoon in the bowl and went to grab the milk. On the way back with the milk, I saw my spoon spinning around the bowl. I knew it wasn't moving when I left it there, so it was quite the surprise. I went to grab the bowl and it stopped on my way there. That was the last I've seen or heard from that girl, but there's more to the story. About 5 years before this all happened, 12 years ago now, my family was renovating the house and we finally got to the kitchen. They wanted to install new cupboards and a new countertop, so the old ones had to be removed. Upon removal of the old cupboards, revealed a drawing on the wall in red and yellow crayon of a little girl with the date 1963. When I looked at it, it was like it was attracting me towards it, almost mesmerizing, but I paid little mind to it as I thought it was insignificant. Knowing all of the events that happen now, it's easy to connect the dots. Some spooky shit had been going on prior, but nothing that screamed ghost. Just some odd metallic bangs, weird static on the radio, stuff that sounded like footsteps far away, that type of shit. So about 3 years ago, I called the non-emergency hotline because I thought I heard somebody fucking with the doors and footsteps, and I was there alone. So if I got jumped or some shit, somebody would know. After I checked that side of the mall and didn't find anyone inside or outside, I was like, okay, they probably left, and ended the call. About 30 minutes later, as I was finishing checking the doors, the intercom started blaring static. But one speaker at a time, and in a way that it was getting closer. I thought, fucking weird, and dipped into an employee area to finish my checks. And when I was maybe 12 feet from the door, I heard footsteps, like somebody running towards me. Boots on concrete, 100%. I hauled ass out the door and called the PD because I deadass thought somebody was after me, like full run for your life type shit. They searched the place, and when I was in the mall after, they searched the place. An officer dipped into the same hallway, and similar shit happened. Their radio started blasting static, and the cop that was in their hallway got spooked by footsteps too. And they searched the immediate area again, so I know I'm not crazy. They didn't find anything, so I don't know what the fuck it is, other than it to be a ghost. I know there used to be an overnight shift, about a year or 2 years ago. I know something happened on that shift. I also know a few days later there was no overnight shift and no more outdoor patrols anymore. The only one who was in security or management at the time, a rookie at the time, is now my supervisor and refuses to talk about it. How the fuck do I pacify, placate, or otherwise deal with the ghost in a mall? Well, I moved into the home in late 2012. It was very, very secluded, and on the driveway is like a mile long all dirt, on top of a heavy forested and fairly steep hill. It was built by a guy who was some sort of contractor who worked on houses. It had one of his former employees and that person's family squat in the house for a few years before they were found and removed. They reported seeing shadow people and having entities attack their animals. They stayed in an abandoned trailer that was left on the property at one point because of the intense paranormal activity. The guy who built the house died, and the squatters happened in the span of a few years before I moved in. The guy who built the house built a massive 3-story garage illegally and lied about the garage's size to the town. The house itself was fairly large and 2 stories, with 5 bedrooms, some of them huge, and 2 full bathrooms. I felt a strange presence from the beginning. The months went on, and I started to feel uncontrollably dark and depressive, and sometimes angry. It's important to note my family had a lot of issues at the time, and they were fairly emotionally abusive. Within the first year or two, my father saw a 7 to 9 foot tall black-robed figure standing in front of the garage staring at him. It had no visible face or body. I believe he saw it on other occasions, but he has severe memory issues, and he probably has fairly severe untreated autism or something. I had an instance where I was outside on the back deck, and I suddenly felt like a massive amount of people, like an audience, was watching me from behind. I turned around and there was a swarm of lights right in front of me that suddenly disappeared after a few seconds. Like a swarm of them. Within 4 years, my father started dating. Him and his girlfriend saw a weird grey mist appear in front of them, and they saw it twice in a row. I believe that she saw other things, but my father doesn't remember, and it's lost to me. My father also complained that shadow people were crawling on his ceiling at night, and a figure that looked like me entered his room one night and was imitating me, but he could sense it wasn't me. I also could tell when I was sleeping on probably dozens of occasions. I could tell I was levitating in my sleep, and I woke up from falling. Not like I was falling in a dream and woke up, like literally I was sound asleep, and I woke up from crashing into my bed. The dogs also on occasion would violently start barking at something outside at night. Another instance, I came home from school and the TV in the living room looked like the inner part of the screen had been smashed. But the outside of the screen was fine, and it ruined the picture on it. About 4 years in, I had poor mental health, and I honestly think I was half possessed most days. I had a dream where I think I was looking at early humans through the eyes of a demon, like the demon made me in their mind. I remember the feeling vividly, and it just wasn't me in the dream. I was literally looking through something else's eyes. I also had another dream at like 5 years, in which I thought I was awake in my bed at 8 in the morning, and my father opened the door and was staring at me smiling, but it wasn't him. It had red eyes. Then I woke up actually staring at the door. I moved out of that house in 2018. This year, I started talking to my father again. A few months ago, he had spirits walking around the house at night, with them being the most powerful at 3 in the morning. One of them would breathe on his neck while he was asleep, and it would feel like fire. He got it to stop using sage, and I was also praying a lot. I was there last weekend or the weekend before, and weird ass shit kept happening with the power going out and radios turning on and off on their own. The car radio turned on when my father's car was off. The worst thing that happened recently was the wolf attacking the dog, causing him to die from stress. After my father got home from the vet, the tools in his tool bag were laid out, like someone arranged them when the tools were all inside the bag. Plus, there was a weird dream recently. Part of it may be my mother, because she was emotionally disturbed, and she had really shitty, crazy-ass friends. One in particular, who got her into witchcraft, essentially. She was kind of a shitty person, so she may be haunting me, I don't know. But it seems like there are other spirits or demons or whatever at the house. One time, some spirits said there was a portal from an underground stream that runs under the house, and the house is on former Native American land.